Good morning and happy Christmas. Good to see y'all this morning. Some of you are a little bit brighter and chippier than others. I can tell who had donuts when you walked in and who did not. But the fact that you're here on a Sunday where I be honest with you, my alarm went off this morning and I kind of groggily rolled over and thought, man, why is my alarm going off on Saturday? It doesn't need to go off on Saturday. And then I had this panic of like, oh wait, I think I'm supposed to be somewhere and do something today. It's that time of the year where we forget whether it's Monday or Tuesday. We don't know what time it is, what year it is, what day it is. All we know is there's still leftovers in the fridge. It's also that time of the year where we begin to reflect, where we look back and begin to look ahead and think about what 2024 was and what we want 2025 to be. And as I think about this morning, and what is it that I want to do and say together this morning, I think I want to tell you something that's not going to be new, but I think is fundamental. It is the heart and soul of what we're doing here this morning and what we do here every single Sunday, and it's what I so desperately need to hear also. But I want to start with this question. What has the story of your year been? We've got some notebooks floating around if you want to grab one of those and jot some things down. Towards the end of this weird sermon that I'm about to give you, I'll explain why it's weird. I'm going to lead you through a couple different reflection questions and prayers. If you want to take out your phone to jab some notes down, that's fine. Otherwise, there's some notebooks. There's some notebooks on the back of the table, and there's some pens in the seats. So feel free to mingle and grab one of those. But what has the story of your year been? Another way I like to ask this question of what's the heart of your year been? And if you really, I know some of y'all well enough to know that some of y'all are really going to complicate this, and you'll think of some, man, I just don't know, and you really wrestle with this. Others of you, there will be a word that instantly pops in your head, and you'll know exactly what the heart of your year was almost instantaneously. But I'd encourage you to mull this question over these next couple of minutes and over the next couple of days. I keep coming back to this idea, and you've heard it in several sermons this year, that the story we think we're living in really does actually matter. It shapes our expectations of how things are supposed to go. It shapes our understanding and expectations of what it is that we're supposed to be actually doing. And there are lots of ways to talk about the modern world that we're all trying to fit our stories into. But I think the underlying heart of what the modern world is, the world that you and I find ourselves having to carve a life out in, is the word secular. I kind of hate that word because I feel like now like an old Baptist preacher shaking my fist at that world, that secular world out there. And I can assure you that's not the direction that this is heading. According to the Jesuit priest, Patrick Gilger, see, a Baptist pastor would never quote a Jesuit priest, so we're already off to a great start. The secular story goes something like this, and this is a quote. Once upon a time, we were young and naive and religious, we as a world. The world was enchanted back then, and the sacred was close at hand. But now, we live in a universe, not a cosmos. We believe not in a deity, but we believe in ourselves. And now we inhabit an immanent frame and have no need for the hypothesis of a God. The secular story is the idea that there is no space, no room for religion or for God in the world. Darwin has essentially eliminated our need for him or her or it. And so, sure, you can believe in a God and you can enter into spiritual practices. In fact, there's literally an app for that. And maybe that's good for you, but this is not an overarching thing that all of humanity is living into. But the reality is the secular story is an illusion. There is no such thing as a world separated from spirituality and religion, as much as we pretend that there is. It makes you think that there is such a thing as a world without God. When in reality, the secular story is a story that's undergirded by democracy, capitalism, and consumerism. And really all it is it's not to say that there is no God, but rather you get to pick who your God will be. The truth is, even in a so-called secular story, humans never stop worshiping. Part of what it means to be a human being is to be a worshiping creature, to give yourself to another, to adore something, find yourself in this other thing. Things that we hope might enhance our life, deliver life to us, or restore our life. And this is the time of year where we're all thinking things like, man, I could stand to lose a few pounds. Maybe that'll make me a little bit better. Man, I did some things this year that I kind of wish I'd have done differently. Maybe I can change some things here and next year will go a little bit smoother. But all of us, as human beings, have innate and infinite desires within us. Restless hearts that are searching for something. Something like arriving. Something like finding ourselves at home. Something like belonging. Something like being enfolded in the arms of love. We're looking for peace. We're looking for contentment. We're looking for something other than what we have. What's interesting about this is I think this is true of us as like capital H humanity. But if you think about the context that we find our yearning and our longing, it is in the context of a people who have more money than anyone in the history has ever had. I remember hearing some sort of anecdote that, so my son Ollie is back there somewhere, so I'm walking, that Ollie has more pictures of him now by the time he turned 1 than like the King of England did in the 12th century. It's like a weird, like obviously true thing because I can look in August and I probably got 200 photos of him from just the month of August. And the king of whoever probably didn't have 200 paintings made of them. We live in a world that is really, really ridiculously wealthy. Even if you are not wealthy in comparison to wealthy people, you still have access to more things than most people in human history ever had. We have more knowledge. We know more stuff and we can learn more stuff and simply pull out the computer in our pocket and we have access to the world's library. We have more technology. Technology that now probably scares us a little bit. Technology that we don't understand. Technology that's being used to manipulate elections and do all sorts of nefarious stuff. And yet we still have it. I'm still waiting for the flying car. I remember on the Discovery Channel, there was like Beyond 2000, that show. Anyone see that? And it was like, the flying car's coming in the year 2005. Yeah, we're still waiting for that one. And we have more opportunity, more freedom of choice. Most of you are going to leave here and you have some sort of say in where you're going to go when you leave. And you'll be able to like actually functionally get there. You could leave now and drive to Dallas. Like this is unheard of 100 years ago. And so given all of our wealth and all of our knowledge and all of our technology and all of our opportunity and all of our freedom, you would think we would be the most satisfied and happy people in the history of humanity. And yet, something in all of us longs for something more. And so we find it. We look for it. We live lives that pursue it. And this is what is worship. So my question this morning for us is, what are you doing with your longing? A longing that is good, that is deeply human, but a longing nonetheless. Maybe you're numbing it, running away from it, trying not everything you can to not feel it. Maybe you're embracing it. Maybe you're trying to satisfy it in your career or your education, or if I could just find that partner that I could spend the rest of my life with, or if we could just start our family, or if my 401k looked a little bit more like this, then that longing will go away. In 2005, the postmodern novelist David Foster Wallace gave a commencement speech at Kenyon College. And it's really shocking because this is not a Christian person. He's not even really a religious person. But he said this in his commencement speech: "In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spirituality to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive." I know some of y'all's stories, and I know some of you have experienced that firsthand, where you've pursued things in life that you were convinced was going to give you life, joy, meaning, purpose, happiness, and all it ever did was take, till you found yourself this shriveled up version of you. He goes on to say, if you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, you will never, ever have enough. If you worship your body and your sexual allure, you'll always be ugly in your own mind. If you worship power and control, you end up weak and afraid with a need for more and more control and power over others in order to curb your fear. If you worship intellect, you'll always feel dumb, a fraud, filled with imposter syndrome. The insidious things about all these forms of worship, he says, is that they are subconscious. They are our default settings. So the story that we find ourselves in, I'm convinced, is a story not if we'll worship, but what we'll worship. And I would love to tell y'all that at least in my black and white way of thinking, that this is a switch. I would just all encourage you to flip your switch today and worship this instead of that, and then all will be well. And yet that's not how this works. It's more like a spectrum, and we're all on it at any given moment towards Christ, the real and authentic object of our worship, and towards all other things that are not Christ. But this is why I'm so glad you're here this morning. Because what I need to remind you of this morning is what I so desperately need to hear myself over and over and over again. I want you to listen to it one more time. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And all things came into being through him. And without him, not a single thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. And that life was the light for every single person. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. John's gospel speaks the resounding truth to my heart and my imagination, and I pray to your heart and your imagination that we do not need to go and find God, that your raise or your promotion or your spouse, none of these things are going to fulfill you, satisfy you, give you what you think they might. But the good news is that God has come to us. We don't need to go find God. We don't need to go find life. Life has come and found us. We were the lost ones in this story, not the other way around. And so whatever the heart of your year has been, this reality that the light shines in the darkness remains true. The light shines in the world's darkness, but it also shines into yours. Maybe you've had a great year. Maybe it's been a banner year, but I'd be willing to bet that it's still filled with plenty of darkness. Plenty of stress, plenty of dissatisfaction, plenty of, but wait till next year. And in these first 5 verses, John tells us the good news. That God, the maker of all things, has come down to you. But not just to stand alongside of you. He's come down to do something for you. But not just to do something for you. He's come to be intimately communing with you, to be with you in the truest sense. He's entered into even death itself, but even death itself, the darkness, did not overcome it. The light has come, and the light will not be snuffed out, not by you, not by me, not by any of the darkest forces in the world. So what are you doing with your longing? There is one out there who is worthy of our worship, who is beauty and goodness and love and truth. And there's a real invitation that we might commune and be connected to that which our heart longs to be communed with. And yet, if you're like me, you find yourself being a little too satisfied with things that are less than that. Looking for satisfaction and joy in weird and unlikely places. Maybe we could better ask it this way. What do you think is going to make you happy? What would it mean for you to take that longing, be curious about it, and put it at the feet of Jesus? So, Mary Oliver wrote a poem called Be Still that I think captures the heart of this pretty nicely, beautifully, better than I could put it. She says this: "Be still, my soul, and steadfast. Earth and heaven are both still watching, though time is draining from the clock, and your walk that was confident and quick has become slow. So be slow if you must, but let the heart still play its true part. Love still as once you loved, deeply, without patience. Let God and the world know you are grateful, that the gift has been given." I think what it means for us to live a life of worship that is oriented in the right direction is to live a life that really believes the gift has already been given. Across from my dorm room when I was in college, like decades ago now, goodness gracious, there was an Orthodox church. And I was at a conservative college, so I knew that those Christians over there were very different from these Christians over here, and whether they were Christian or not was up for debate. And they had these things that they would do that I thought were weird. They would light stuff and smell it. It was strange. They had these things on their walls called icons. They were, in my mind, idolatrous images that they worshipped. Well, problem was in their mind, that's not what they were doing at all. Over the last couple of years, as I've become acquainted with the Orthodox Church and what they actually believe and think, I've become acquainted with what an icon actually is and what it's meant to do. And as I've begun to explore that, I've begun to see what they're actually doing and what they're inviting all Christians into, which is living a life of prayer. See, what an icon is it's a photo of a saint. And what you're meant to do is you stand before it and you observe what is essentially a piece of art. And in prayer, you suddenly become aware of God's presence. Not in the piece, but through the piece. It becomes like a window that you look into and then through and out to see the God that's been there behind it the whole time. But they go further than this and say that really to live a life of prayer is to live a life where all of the world is an icon. Where you begin to see in your workplace, in your commute, and you're waking up and you're going to bed and your boring ham sandwich that you eat at lunch, your delicious cup of coffee or mediocre cup of coffee that you have on the way to work, you begin to see the God who is with you and the beauty and the goodness and the delight of all the world that is a gift. Could we cultivate an awareness of the reality that the light is shining in the darkness, and that the darkness has not and cannot and will not overcome it? Not ever. So whatever the story of your year has been, whether you were aware of it or not, it has at least been the story of light shining in darkness.